3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the Northampton School Committee, Thursday, November 12th, 2020. I'm Mayor David Narkowitz, the chair of the committee. This meeting is being held as a remote online Zoom meeting in accordance with Governor Baker's emergency order modifying the state's open meeting law. It is also being audio and video recorded. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. It's being audio and video recorded. It's also being broadcast on Northampton Open Media. I'm going to begin by asking the clerk to call the roll of the school committee, who I think I may have just inadvertently muted everyone. So hopefully they can all unmute. If not, I'll go through and unmute them. Go ahead, Annie.
Member Kaufman.
Here, present.
Member Goldman.
Present.
Member Voss.
Present.
Member Gold.
Present.
Mayor Narkowitz.
Present.
Member Busansky.
Present.
Member Fallon. Not here. Member Seraphy Cox.
Present.
Member Condon.
Present.
And Member Levy.
Present.
Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And I received a late breaking message from Member Fallon, who's having a family medical issue that she's dealing with. So she is delayed in that regard. So, the first item on our agenda is our public comment period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to offer public comment. We allow 3 minutes, and we ask residents who are interested in offering public comment to use the raise hand function in Zoom. If you're on Zoom on a computer, that's obviously the little blue raise hand function next to your name. If you're calling by telephone, it's a *6 function. I will looking now to see if there's anyone that is interested in offering public comment. I have one hand that is raised. I will keep a timer of 3 minutes. When I recognize you, I would ask you to unmute and just let people know your name and where you live for the public record. So the only hand that I see raised is iPhone. I don't have a name on it, so I would ask the person who goes by iPhone to please unmute themselves and offer their public comment.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jill Underwood and I live in Palmer. However, my son is a student at Northampton High School. He is in school choice. So I know at the October 22nd meeting, there was mention from, I believe, Member Levy about interim support for the Northampton high schoolers since they're delayed opening for in-person. I just wondering if someone might comment on that today. But in light of that, I know that the information coming back for the weaknesses in the remote learning model that was presented on October 22nd were really significant. And that was only a month into this current remote plan. So I'm wondering how we're expecting the students in the high school who are going to be 4 months out from the October date having to bear up under this for an additional 3 to 4 months. So I'm wondering if that can be revisited, but also because of our high schoolers, our seniors, this is a really critical semester for them. They're applying to colleges, and I don't feel that they're on an equal footing with students in other jurisdictions that are back in school or even other states when applying to colleges. The colleges can't be expected to determine different levels of acceptance based on a district's learning model. So I was just wondering if somebody might address that and not delay our 12th graders from coming back until after the semester ends, where they have no recourse or assistance to make up for the lack of learning that they've been presented with, and which a lot are struggling under. So I really feel strongly about that, not only because my son is a 12th grader and he is struggling. He actually had even mentioned a few weeks ago he doesn't even want to go to college now because he's so disappointed over everything. And I don't know if that touches in with the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 to advance college and career readiness. I don't feel like this remote learning is doing that for a lot of students. And also maybe if we can take a look at the 1 day a week when they do return, perhaps that can be moved to 2 days a week, because it's really ending up being 80% remote learning still when they go back if it's just 1 day. So I know and I appreciate all of the hard work and effort everyone has been putting in and continuing to put in. I don't belittle that. I really, really appreciate everything. I just felt very strongly to speak up on my son's behalf and other students too. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your public comment this evening. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to offer public comment this evening? If you could just signify by raising your virtual hand. Okay. At this juncture, I'm not seeing anyone else who's raising their hand. So I will then go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is announcements. Are there any announcements from members of the school committee? Okay. Hearing none, we will now move on. Actually, we only have one item for recommended actions this evening, and it's a vote on minutes which are not available. So we will not have a consent agenda this evening either. We do not have any budget transfers to my knowledge, so we now will move to a vote. This is a vote on a donation from the Jackson Street PTO of $7,000. And I would entertain a motion, and we can get an explanation if we need that. Is there a motion to accept the gift of $7,000 from the Jackson Street PTO?
Mayor, before we move to that, I had a question about the minutes.
Sure.
I don't remember the last time that we actually voted on minutes. And so I'm wondering if we could get an update about what minutes are approved, what minutes still need to be approved. It strikes me that I don't know if the minutes are going on the website before they're being approved, or, that these are records for the public. So just wondering if we could have an update about that.
Sure, that would be, I'd need to defer to the superintendent or to Annie on that question.
Sure.
I'll take it. We have a backlog of minutes. We had a backlog of minutes when I started 2 years ago, so we were already in a backlog. I think that with the previous clerk, it happened with negotiations ramping up. So this year with negotiations and COVID, we went from having 4 or 5 meetings a month to 17 meetings a month.
Mm-hmm.
So these minutes that I'm excuse me, working on right now are July 9th. And it was a 7-hour meeting. And a 7-hour meeting takes about 60 hours of work to write the minutes. And so we should consider that when we have these really long meetings. So I'm looking forward to having fewer meetings so I can get to that work. We can get to that caught up. Nothing goes on the website until it's approved. So we have a lot of catching up to do.
But we do have we have notes that could be, if a member of the public requested the notes, we would provide them. They're just not the complete minutes.
That's right. And we have notes and we have the record of all the votes.
Yes. So
as
that's,
well as everything's recorded.
Yes.
I'm curious, my understanding of minutes is that it is just the recording of votes, but is that not the type of minutes that we take?
I am doing more and more of just doing that. That really wasn't the the process for a few years, so we're trying to pull that back in.
Yeah.
We have really, really long meetings. I have discussions on the listserv with the clerks across Massachusetts on how I'm going to handle this. Other people have been dealing with this, but we're number one with how long our meetings are. So it's going to be a challenge. And I look forward to getting it done. It's just a lot of meetings, as you know, Emily.
No.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm trying more and more to make sure I just link to the discussion for every discussion we have, and we're trying really hard to keep the agendas as short as possible. So we're working on it.
Okay, thanks for that update.
Okay. So
I also have my hand up, I'm sorry.
certainly.
I was gonna just follow up on that and add that I thought, it seems like we've transitioned to what you just described, Annie, and I think that's really good where we can just click on the discussion. And I would just encourage us doing shorter and getting them done. They're recorded. So I feel like 60 hours for a 6 or 7 hour meeting, I completely understand how much work it must be, but I would just personally encourage you to try to just do what you did for the last couple sets. I think they worked well.
That's what I'm doing.
And the other thing, since we're on the topic, I just wanted to sort of get a sense of is, I don't think our executive session notes for years have appeared. And honestly, it's a concern just because it's impossible to remember everything. So I'm just curious where that fits into.
Well, they are totally saved. They're word for word notes that I've taken. And I did catch up on a lot of them in the fall of 2018. So you did approve a whole bunch of them then. We've approved maybe 1 or 2 since then, but we haven't approved any. And there's a ton of them because of negotiating. So I keep them brief, but they're completely complete and covered. And you will be approving a lot of minutes as soon as this COVID crisis is over.
Yeah, and I guess my final comment just to the group is, I think it's probably more than one person can handle. This is not a reflection on Annie, but it does seem like we might need to get some extra people of power on this. Okay.
Yes. And obviously with regard to executive session minutes, we can approve them, but if we may not necessarily be able to release them if there's still ongoing, matters under negotiation, but your point is well taken. And
well, actually, let me just add, I'm concerned we have executive session meeting notes to approve where more than half the school committee wasn't even at the meeting. So that's partly why I think it's actually really important for us to put some resources into this. Thanks.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other questions related to minutes before we move on to the agenda items? Member Gold.
Sorry to take more time on this, but I just do want to point out, I have, this year and in previous years, I have seen school committee folks ask the clerk to revise things that have been written. And I think that's sort of where it takes the 60 hours. Like I get where that comes from, because if she does, or if Andy makes it too general or not specific enough, then we go back and say, rewrite it. And so it's kind of like a bind that she's in. If she's going to do them to the point where there isn't any vagueness, then that's going to take some time. And or if we're okay with it being vague and getting them done, then that's something we would need to hold ourselves to and just accept that that's what it says. So
I think we've resolved that. And I appreciate you saying that. I really do. I think that just linking to the discussion has resolved that. But there's a lot of amendments and friendly amendments back and forth. It's a lot of really trying to make sure you get it accurately. I worked on it all afternoon. Of course, in the office, the public is calling all day long. So it's hard to do. It's hard to concentrate on. And, we're meeting a lot. So, but I appreciate what you say, Member Golden. And that's very true. But I think we've resolved that by linking to the video for every discussion.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, so we're back on the proposed
motion to approve JSS donation.
Okay.
That's what you were asking for, I think.
Yes, I was.
Second.
Seconded, okay. Is there any information about this particular donation that we need to pass along? John, I don't see Cammie on the call.
Cammie's not feeling well tonight.
Okay.
I believe this is very similar to other PTO donations that we've accepted many times in the past.
Excellent. Then I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Well, so I'm sorry, but I did have a question. Like, do we know what it's, does it matter what it's for? Is it okay to just do a cash dump like that? I'm fine with it if it is. It's just my first, I don't know if I recall seeing something like
Yeah,
that.
typically, I turn to Cammie because there's a gift form that gets filled out. So I don't know if I have, Annie, was that included with this pack?
That was included, but it was kind of vague, and I admit I was sort of expecting Cammie to fill us in on the details at the meeting, but she's not feeling well tonight.
Dr. Provost?
So I just want to point out that our policy allows the committee to accept both a directed or an undirected gift. The gift giver does not have to specify what the funds are to be used for. They all become the school committee's funds. But in this case, since it's to Jackson Street, it would be clear that it would be against the intent of this donation to use the funds at any other school. But I would say for any activity specific to Jackson Street, that would be permissible.
So the short answer, Member Gold, is I don't have that information tonight. So we can certainly delay the vote if you'd feel more comfortable.
No, it wouldn't change my vote. I'm just curious what,
Okay.
just learning really.
Okay. Okay, so I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
and Member Kaufman.
Yes, and thank you, Jackson Street PTO.
The vote is 9 in favor.
Okay, so the motion carries and this gift is gratefully accepted from Jackson Street PTO. Next, we'll move to reports and recommendations from our various subcommittees and administrators and liaisons. First up is rules and policy. Obviously, Member Fallon is not with us this evening, so I don't know if there's any other committee members that know of any updates that need to be provided. But hearing none, I'll move on to an update, any potential updates from superintendent evaluation and Member Condon. No?
We have no updates for the evaluation subcommittee.
Okay. And then budget and property and Member Busansky.
I think I will just, my update really is the discussion on implementing a later start time for the high school. So I'll just save that for it looks like that's further down on the agenda.
Yes, it is. It's under new business, I believe. So, so let's then move.
Mayor?
Yes.
Like, and regarding the rules and policies one, I don't know if Member Fallon will come back later, but does anyone know or can remind me, did we ever settle that whole thing about who's representing us at MASC? And
Well,
all that?
unfortunately, it happened and we sort of drafted her into doing it, although
Cool.
she went, but we didn't actually have she was not able to vote. So because there was not, the paperwork was not turned in or something to that effect. I don't know. So she didn't actually have voting credentials. So she did go, she did attend. I don't believe she voted. So maybe that's a good thing given the controversy about the MASC question. So Northampton was unable to vote. So yes, but she did attend and she probably would give us an update at a future meeting at what happened.
Thanks.
So the next would be school business administrator report and personnel report. Obviously, Cammie is not here this evening. John, did you have anything summative to add about those?
Sure, just that we continue to keep an eye on expenses this year. There are variances in the budget that are tending to overspending the budget. We do have some grants that we'll be using to mitigate the impact of that, but it's a little hard for us to determine where we are right now because the expenses are changing pretty radically on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, and personnel wise, any major issues personnel-wise?
We do have the list of new hires and the list of separations, which is included in your packet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then that brings us to your superintendent report. So I will turn it over to you for superintendent report.
Thank you. And before I start that, Annie is just going to share her screen for a second. And I'm going to try to exit full screen. Okay, so this graphic you've seen before, but it was at one of the meetings where I didn't have an opportunity to speak about it, so I will present it tonight as my report. This is just a visual to show us some of the organizations we're partnering with to help us with the work of anti-biased, anti-racist education in the district. There are 3 main initiatives and 3 main partners that we have working with us this year, and each of them has their own lane to run in. So I will just talk to you about the three agencies we have helping us with the work. So the first is Black Print Education Consulting. This is an organization that supports districts and schools to develop and execute the competencies, policies, practices, and structures necessary to produce educational equity and excellence for historically marginalized students, especially those of African or Indigenous descent. Through our partnership with Black Print, the administrative leadership team will engage in a culturally responsive practices leadership academy, which will include over 15 sessions over the next 2 years. The academy is designed to help us build our capacity to weave culturally responsive practices and a racial equity lens throughout our policies, structures, and systems. We will examine content on the intersection of race, culture, class, and schooling, and received personalized consulting and guidance towards the construction and execution of district-wide plans. This work will culminate in the unveiling and celebration of one-year goals and implementation plans during the spring of 2021, and a long-term strategic plan during the spring of 2022. I met with 2 Black Print's vice presidents this summer to plan the logistics of the leadership training that has already started with our first session. We're partnered with 2 other districts, one from Worcester County and one from Hampden County. Actually, I think it's probably at the very edge of Hampshire County. That will be our sort of thought partners throughout this work. I have asked the district improvement team to reserve a spot for the goal that comes out of this work. The district and chief improvement group has an overarching concern, I would say, for equity in the district. And since this group is focused on a year-long process and coming up with a goal around equity, I've asked them to sort of reserve space within the district improvement plan to fit that in. So the second group we're working with is the Education Trust, which is a national nonprofit that works to close opportunity gaps that disproportionately affect students of color and students from low-income families. Through their research and advocacy, Ed Trust supports the efforts that expand excellence and equity in education from preschool through college, increase college access and completion, particularly for historically underserved students, engage diverse communities dedicated to education equity, and increase political and public will to act on equity issues. I've been working with the Education Trust for the past 8 months now to follow up on one of the recommendations from our last district review. If you recall, this was to enlist students in sharing their views on their educational experience in the district, with particular attention to the culture of school, diversity, inclusion, our school curriculum, instruction, assessment, and support services. The Education Trust has expertise in designing and interpreting instruments to elicit insights from students about the status of equitable instruction in public school settings. Originally, we had hoped to accomplish this through student focus groups, but given the COVID situation and the difficulty of conducting this type of research via Zoom, we've shifted to survey methodology. We expect expect the surveys to be deployed later this year. This work is also reflected in one of my evaluation goals for this year, which will culminate in the sharing of my reflections on key themes that emerge from this research in a brief presentation for the school committee. This year, the school councils also adopted the new code of conduct, as you know. The code declares that racism and other forms of oppression are among the nation's most vital and pressing and challenging issues that have been for hundreds of years. While our schools have served as great engines of opportunity, they've also served to deny and exclude those less privileged and have reinforced institutional racism in subtle and unsubtle ways. Education can and must be a catalyst for lasting change. As educators, we recognize the urgency of these issues and will work to challenge and educate ourselves. We strive to find concrete ways to promote social justice and equity in our classrooms, schools, and communities. And I think that hearing from the students who have been educated in this environment we've created will be one of the very powerful ways we can educate ourselves on some of the areas where we have room for growth. So the Education Trust will be helping us with that. And then the third group we have working with us this year is the Collaborative for Educational Services, which, as you know, is a Northampton-based nonprofit educational agency. Social justice and equity work has always been critical to the mission of CES, and they have been a longtime partner for the district in our work to challenge racism and support equity. The current memorandum of agreement between the Northampton Public Schools and Northampton Association of School Employees calls for 1/2 Wednesday of each month, while the district is in remote or hybrid mode, to be dedicated to anti-biased, anti-racist ABAR education. Implementing the new code of conduct with fidelity is an important ABAR strategy for the district. So to ensure a high quality implementation, we're working with CES to provide a series of trainings on restorative practice and embedded within the new code of conduct. So that work began in September. We had a follow-up session in October. I have been working with them to design the sessions for November and December. After that, if we're still in a hybrid mode, I have plans to circle back to to Black Prince to actually follow up on one of the issues that came out of the second session with CES, which was developing a district-wide definition of equity, which happens to be another training and expertise that Black Print has. So when we finish the training on the code of conduct, we will then circle back to Black Print to help us with that definitional work. I can say that we started our process with CES with a panel discussion by several of the teachers who helped us to write the new code of conduct, and a presentation by our CES colleagues entitled Interrupting the School to Prison Pipeline. So the design of the CES work and the design of our work with the other two partners allows us to support multiple levels and multiple perspectives on anti-biased, anti-racist education without duplicating our efforts. So I look forward to a purposeful and impactful year of organizational growth as we work with these three groups to improve our practices in the district. And that's my report for this month.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, Superintendent Provost, for that report. We'll now move into new business, and we have a vote to, this is to accept the NEF SOS grants round 2. And I believe Member Kaufman will be presenting that as our liaison to the Northampton Education Foundation Board. Member Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all know, the Northampton Education Foundation, or NEF, has a number of different funding streams, and tonight they're asking us to approve their awarding of $3,575 to 2 applicants for their second round of what's known as the Small Grants to Teachers Awards. I'm just going to read this real quickly for the public. The first grant is called Critical Support to Preschool Remote Learning, and it's for $2,055 to be used to purchase materials to support all of our Northampton Public School preschool students. And I want to thank Laura Fragamini and Rachel Mateus for this idea. This project will create weekly packets of materials for each preschooler household in the Northampton Public Schools virtual preschool. Packets of art supplies, blocks, play figures, and paper dolls will give concrete materials essential to sensory-based learning and ensure that all families have the materials they need to learn and grow. The second award is called Walking Trail, and that is for $1,520 to be used to fund time and materials to support students attending the Ryan Road Elementary School. And for this, I want to thank Vanessa Keeler and Rebecca Minton for this idea. This project encourages and rewards walking by students, staff members, and community members. Building on the existing recess walking program, the current walking trail will be clearly marked for distance and include information on animal speeds, what's seen from various points on the trail, and math equivalent lengths. So I'd like to make a motion for the school committee to accept the second round of NEF small grants to teacher awards in the amount of $3,575.
Second.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded by Member Busanski. Are there any questions about this particular motion? Okay, hearing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busanski,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
and Member Goldman.
Yes.
The vote is 9 in favor.
Okay, so the motion carries, and these latest round SOS grants, NEF grants rather, are accepted gratefully. We thank NEF as always, and thank the educators who've come up with these creative programs that NEF helps to fund. So for the next item on the agenda, I'm actually going to ask the vice chair. The vice chair may wish to make a statement, and then I'll probably be putting him in the waiting room for this particular item.
Sure. I'm simply going to need to recuse myself from this agenda item. So when you put me in the waiting room, you'll just let me back in when you're done discussing?
I will let you back in, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
See you soon. Okay, so Member Kaufman is in the waiting room. This is a vote to approve summer pay for the Early Childhood Outreach Coordinator. And I believe this is pursuant to a memorandum of agreement. And I would entertain a motion to put it on the floor in second so that we can discuss.
I would move to approve the Early Childhood Outreach Coordinator summer pay.
Second.
Okay, so it's motions made by Member Seraphy Cox and seconded by Member Goldman. John, did you want to give us just a quick thumbnail sketch of this?
Sure, yes. I know that you are all aware, but for the public, just to explain, this is for summer pay for an individual who is in Unit A, which is our teacher's contract. The teacher's contract talks about a work year of 185 days. So when we have individuals who routinely work in the summer as part of their job, who are members of Unit A, it creates a disadvantage for them at retirement. It goes to something called creditable service, where the MTRS, which is the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System, looks at the reported wages that an individual makes in their final years. Typically, it's the top 3 years, which is usually their final years, and then matches it up to the individual collective bargaining agreement to see that it is a sensible and possible salary. So if you have someone who's in Unit A who's working additional hours in the summer and those hours are not reflected in the collective bargaining agreement, then that additional pay is not credited towards the retirement calculation. So the way to resolve that is to have language such as language in front of you tonight, which says that this position includes a certain number of summer hours. That makes it a part of the CBA so that when retirement comes, the MTRS will look at the agreement that's an attachment to this to collective bargaining agreement and allow this person full credit for the work they did during the summer.
Okay, are there any questions about this particular motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman. Oh,
Member
sorry.
Kaufman.
Member Goldman
Yes.
and Member Voss.
Yes.
The vote is 8 in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. That is approved, and I will now bring Member Kaufman back in from the waiting room. Member Kaufman, welcome back. We are now moving on to a vote on a resolution in support of maintaining Chapter 70, the hold harmless provisions. And I'm going to be handling this evening because Member Fallon, as I mentioned before, is dealing with a personal emergency this evening. And so this is a resolution that has been developed by Member Fallon and would be sent to all of our state leaders in education and obviously in the executive branch, as well as the leadership of the House and Senate and our representatives in the House and Senate, Senator Comerford and Representative Sabadosa. It reads, whereas the legislature passed the Student Opportunity Act to equalize education funding, and whereas some advocacy groups seeking to implement the act quickly proposed to eliminate the hold harmless provision of the current law that prevents the reduction of state aid to any city, town, or regional district from the amount of aid from the previous year. And whereas the Northampton School Committee originally supported the Student Opportunity Act, but with the elimination of the hold harmless provision, we would lose more than $424,000, which we cannot support. And whereas such a loss would have a negative impact on the equitable access to and quality of education in our communities, resulting in a dramatic reduction to services, including but not limited to a reduction of staffing levels with corresponding class increases in class size at all grade levels, potential cuts to elective programs, specials, and extracurricular activities, reductions to special education, English language learner and intervention services for our most vulnerable students with the highest needs. And whereas many public school districts like ours have experienced declining enrollment due to many factors, including the current pandemic, but still have annual inflation of fixed costs and therefore have higher costs per students and less ability to benefit from the economy of scale that is assumed in the foundation budget calculations. And whereas public schools like ours rely heavily on this aid, in part because we are disproportionately impacted by the state's repeated failure to fully fund the subject to appropriation mandates of charter reimbursement, circuit breaker, and homeless student transportation. Therefore, let it be resolved that we, the undersigned, ask DESE and DLS in the strongest possible terms to preserve hold harmless aid upon implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. Losing hold harmless would have a profound negative impact on the quality and equity of our public schools. And I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
Motion to approve this resolution on hold harmless.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion or questions about the resolution? It's, I believe it's one that other districts are working on and school committees are approving. Member Busansky.
That was exactly my question, Mayor. So this is a resolution that's being passed across by school committees across the Commonwealth, I assume that.
That's correct. MASC is seeking. You may recall the superintendent had distributed an article, I don't know, several months ago about a business organization in the greater Boston area that was proposing to eliminate this aspect.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that you said that. I just wanted to make sure we were sort of aligning ourselves with.
Yes, and I believe this is a model resolution that's been tweaked a little bit by Member Fallon, and obviously given the local context of our funding situation. So,
great, thank you.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, then I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Narcoitz,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
and Member Gold.
Yes.
The vote is 9 in favor.
Okay, I'm sure Member Fallon would vote yes in spirit if she were here, but we thank her for her work on this resolution, and we'll be getting it off to the folks that are referenced in it. So thank you. Now we move to item D under new business, and this is a discussion and possible vote to implement a later start time model for August 2021. And I'll turn this over to Member Busansky, who's been working on this with her colleagues on budget and property.
Thank you. So this feels like a big digression from everything we've been talking about the last few months. So it's might be hard to kind of wrap our heads around it. But as I think you might all recall, back in January and February, we were charged with looking at late start with the hope that we would vote on something. Actually, the motion we made said we'd vote on something in November. And what we are proposing tonight is a discussion of the two late start plans. They're late start plans for the high school that we are proposing with a vote in December, actually not tonight. So just to give a little context, we are really, and a big thank you to Tammy Lieber for all of her work on this. We're talking about implementing a late start model for the high school once our pre-COVID ridership is back to our original transportation numbers. So once we're able to resume normal transportation operations, we would not be able to implement this with our current transportation model. And the two plans that we've come up with both mean that there's no additional cost to busing. They are the same as our current transportation budget, which I think is very good news. So the two that you have before you, which Annie sent out revised versions this afternoon, are Plan A. And just for the public, general public to know, Plan A would be elementary schools starting at 8 o'clock and ending at 2 o'clock, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. JFK would be 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. and NHS would be 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. In Plan B, we flip NHS and JFK. So NHS elementary starting at 8, NHS starting at 8:30, and JFK starting at 9 o'clock. We looked at many different iterations, thanks to Tammy, that added a lot of cost to the transportation budget, including having elementary start last. But you might recall, because we have different lengths of days in the different school levels, elementary is 6 hours, whereas NHS and JFK are 6.5 hours. It makes it very difficult to reverse the order. We had also started off this whole conversation in January and February with moving everything a half an hour later. And I think you might recall that elementary parents especially were very upset at the thought of starting school at 9:20. We received a lot of emails and discussion about the research that shows, and I remember some members on this committee talked about the research that shows that elementary students do better start learning in the morning than they do later in the day. So I think that 8 o'clock start time, sort of speaks to that we're starting these elementary school kids earlier. There's every plan has pros and cons. I think at this point, we all know that more than ever before after everything we've been through. So, of course, this will impact elementary school parents' schedules. This doesn't account for middle and high school siblings or babysitters who go pick up little kids when elementary school lets out. You might also recall in all the surveying that we had done in the year prior to all the new folks coming on board in January, that the one question we never asked, even the student union did a survey of high school students, we never asked the question, how will this affect you picking up a younger student, an elementary student, because we thought we were pushing everything just a half an hour later. So that is the one piece of information we don't have any real numbers on, and will have some kind of an impact. Now, of course, we've been discussing late start in the high school for, I think we must be over a decade now, and we have more after school options today than we had 10 or 11 years ago. So that's the good news. As Tammy pointed out in the sheet she provided to you, that sometimes the bus drivers have to stay longer. Elementary takes a little longer, and so that could impact the middle school and high school being a little bit late. And then I also just wanted to speak to elementary students walking to school in the morning, because on our latest morning, the latest dark morning on the dark days of December and January, elementary students will have to be at the bus at 7:15. And thanks to Superintendent Provost, who looked up that civil dawn is at 6:40. So civil dawn is the time. I've learned a little bit too much about these things. Civil dawn is actually the time that when it becomes light out compared to sunrise, which is later. So it becomes light out at 6:40. Kids have to be at the bus by 7:15. It seems like they have a pretty good window to be walking still in the light of day, even on those really dark days. But that is definitely something to take into consideration. We did also look at and discuss having a late bus for JFK and NHS. And I know that the school committee as a whole is really interested in that idea. And it's another thing we've been discussing for years, the importance of it. Tammy looked into it. It would cost about $78 to $80 per day, I think, per bus. Is that right, Tammy? And it would be probably be more than one bus. We did not go that much farther with it, because just what we're going to be facing with our budgetary issues going into the next year, and this time of COVID and everything we've been through, it doesn't seem like a really realistic option to start for next year. But if the school committee feels differently, that they want to direct Superintendent Provost to actually start building that into the budget and what that cost would be and where that money would come from, then we could decide differently. It's a perfect timing for that, since he usually starts the budget process in December. And I think that is, Tammy, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think you covered everything. The only thing with the late bus, I think, is if the bus is running from the high school and there's still school in session, say JFK is still there, the price did go up to, I think it was $225 or $275 per bus, only because you still had school in session.
Right.
So that would be the only big thing there. But other than that, if anybody needs to email me with questions, I can try to answer other questions if they have.
Great. And, I do want to add, and I know this is in your packet, but, there may be increases in cost and availability because of out of district transportation and sports busing. So that will still be to come. We don't have any of that information yet. And again, that's a May. So what the Budget and Property Subcommittee is suggesting is that we discuss tonight, ask questions, et cetera, And then we put a survey out. I know everyone in the district is a little surveyed out, but we really would like to get hear from our community on which of these two plans they prefer. There is always a third option that we don't vote for either one of them. I guess that would be a possibility. So we're going to, Tammy and the superintendent and I also discussed that survey last week, and then that we would come back and we would vote at our December meeting. So I think that's it for my presentation. I see a couple hands, unless any of the other budget and property subcommittee members have anything to add.
Member Levy, you have your hand up.
Thanks. First, I want to thank the Budget and Property Subcommittee. We gave you a tall task. It felt like it was going to be impossible to come up with really great options with a no-cost solution, and these strike me as phenomenal. I think, at first glance, both of these plans seem really, I see benefits to both of them. And so I want to thank you for so much hard work and dedication and thinking creatively. So first, just want to share my excitement that I think there's a lot to look forward to. Just a couple of questions. Were you able to get a sense? So I'm thinking about elementary schools and how many more students might need to use the after-school services. Have you had any conversations with the elementary school folks to get a sense of whether there's capacity? I know that it gets tricky because some of the schools do their own programs, other schools work with the Y. And so do we know, or is this something we'll be looking into about capacity for an increase in after-school services?
That's a really good question. We didn't look into it specifically. We had in that original model, the moving everything half hour later model, talked to the Y. I remember about starting earlier, and they were fine with that. I don't know, Superintendent, if you have anything to add, but it probably would make sense to go back and check with them before our vote in December.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Superintendent.
Thanks. Yeah, this whole process kicked off with that half an hour slide investigation. Expanding before and after school care was going to be a very important component of that. And so at that time, had asked the Y for their capacity for before and after school programming at the schools. And both of them were able to essentially double the capacity they currently have. Their licensing is for twice as many students as they serve now. So we think that's a very flexible part of the model.
Great. And I would imagine that there probably would be also a lot fewer families needing before school care. So that could be a plus to this as well. So I do not feel like we should make our decision based on athletics, and just to be as informed as possible, what would either 3 o'clock or 3:30 dismissal time at the high school do to athletics?
Well, without a doubt, we don't have any hard numbers. I remember we had talked to Mr. Morrison, the former athletic director, pretty early on. I mean, but just on the face of things, 3 o'clock means that athletes that have to, if we went with Plan B that ends the high school at 3 o'clock, it means fewer students would have to leave early, would lose less time in school if they had to leave early for a meet, and ending the high school at 3:30 would mean, in Plan A, would mean that they would lose an extra half an hour. But I suppose we could maybe go back to Ms. McFarland and ask her about, do you think that's worthwhile, Tammy and Dr. Provost?
Yes. I'll also just say, so the real issue is away meets. And it's really spring and fall sports. There's no impact on winter sports, no appreciable impact anyways, because those are either indoors or they happen on lit ski slopes. And for your home games, you can always control the time of the meet. But when we were away playing any of the fall sports or spring sports, we probably would, in that later model, students would probably miss for most of the away meets the entire fourth period. And for some of the more far out ones would miss part of third period and all of fourth period.
Right. And, I think it's just important to think about, what this would mean in terms of, getting our kids. Well, like you said, Member Levy, it's not going to be just about athletics for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess I would also encourage us to think, we had talked about this, but it's been a very long time since we've talked about this. I'd encourage us to think about what it might look like to say to those other schools where we would be traveling, sorry, but we can't be there until this time. So we need the game to actually, or the meet or whatever, be pushed to this other time. I don't know how much flexibility we would have, but I would encourage us to think about that.
Yeah.
And my last thought is sort of question. If we do want to go the route of having a late bus in the middle school and high school, even a few days a week, we don't have to decide that with this, right? Like that would be a separate conversation about the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
I do believe, Dr. Provost, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would want some direction from the school committee, at least at our December meeting, to start looking at if we wanted to build that into the budget for next year. But
yes, for the reason you mentioned, we're starting the budget process next month.
Yeah. And to your point, Member Levy, and we've talked about this before in past years as school committee, is that, someone needs to be kind of a leader in this region to start helping to everyone to move a little later. And that's, if sports as a region moved later, we would all be in sort of better shape on this front.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks again for all your work on this. Okay, I'll stop there.
Member Kaufman, you have your hand up next.
I do, thank you. I also, like Member Levy, want to thank the 3 members of the subcommittee and all of your forebearers. I think my son was asked to be on a survey about this when he was in high school, and we had a good discussion about it. The problem is my son's now 29, and so he doesn't remember that anymore, but only partially joking aside, the amount of hours and time and the investigation, research into this is phenomenal. And I really hope we can do something about this. I haven't looked at recent research, but I doubt if it's changed. Maybe it's worth looking into, but this is really all about helping our high school kids be more alert in school, getting more sleep, starting school later, which means all of our kids are going to benefit eventually. Unfortunately, maybe the seniors won't, but the other benefit was that, this will clearly be another sort of shift in folks' lives. But the idea was that we would make a decision early in the fall, November, or maybe December now, and that would allow up to 8 months, 9 months for families to make the kind of adjustments that the community can support them with, the schools can support them with, and certainly they can find for themselves alternative options and whatnot. So I just want to put it out there that we can open this up again and we can do surveys and we can ask people and we'll hear from public comment. I would hope that we all could put it into context that every time we're about to make a decision, we don't. And I say we, it's not only my 4th or 5th year now on the school committee that discussing this, but the school committees before me. And there's something to be said about looking for something perfect. And I would say that if we can do something with this, it's probably the greatest thing that we can do as a school committee in terms of enhancing the quality of education for all of our students in a manner that I think is probably not going to be all that big of an adjustment. Many schools have done it. And like I said before, the research is pretty profound. So the biggest dilemma was transportation, and you guys have done a phenomenal job. I mean, it sounds so easy now. I don't know what you did.
Well, really, I have a kudos to Tammy Lieber because she came to us, she looked at this in every way possible, looked at family ridership. I kind of liked the idea of all students getting, a family getting on the bus together, but it's not really realistic. She looked at every, so many iterations. So it was really kudos to Tammy and her creativity.
Well, thank you, Tammy. And Dr. Provost, do you have any strong feelings on this one way or another, or do you want to hold until next month to share those?
Sure, I'll weigh in now. I believe it's for Plan B, which is the later start and end time. When I was presenting my last version of the plan, it was with an 8 o'clock start for the high school. And let's be clear, that was very much a compromise. That was because the faculty at the high school had said 8 o'clock is about as late as we feel comfortable going. I think that was affirmed or reaffirmed this year when the start time could be any time because we're not providing transportation, and they went for 8 o'clock again. So we are going to be, disregarding the preferences of the high school faculty. So if we're going to do it, let's not do it for 30 minutes. Let's make the high school as late as it can possibly be, because if you get into 8:30, there's some benefit, but the research says that the high school should start much later. And if you talk about a 9 o'clock start time or a 9:30 start time, then you're starting to get into the sweet spot of what the research indicates would be ideal for students. So I say if you're not going to be bound by the 8 o'clock start time, then make the high school start as late as it can possibly be.
So that would be Plan A, though, I believe, right?
Mhm.
I'm sorry if I got the letters backwards.
Minor thing. Okay, thank you, Dr. Provost.
Okay, Member Seraphy Cox.
My question was just answered by the superintendent. Thank you.
Okay. I would note, I don't know how many of you read the look back column in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, but I believe a few days ago, there was a 10 years ago, Superintendent Salzer was scheduling a public forum on the late start issue. And I don't think he was the first superintendent to take it up. So just a little context there. And I would also just say, as somebody who's been part of this conversation probably the longest on the current school committee, we're not over the finish line yet, because none of these scenarios, we've never tinkered with the elementary schedule. All the scenarios heretofore have just been tinkering with the high school schedule, and it was always considered sort of verboten that you would touch the elementary schedule because of all the issues there. So I wouldn't pop any champagne corks until we hear from the elementary parents. So just my word of caution. Okay, Member Goldman.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be talking about this. Thank you for keeping it on the agenda in the midst of what we're already dealing with. I know that this has been a topic for a very long time, and many times the school committee has approved a late start, and then it got withdrawn because of budget issues. And that's a concern of mine for this upcoming year also. Superintendent Provost spoke about concerns about, just monitoring the budget this past year. And I know that this isn't an increase in cost, but I am just wondering what your thoughts are on the likelihood of us being able to implement this if we're working with a smaller budget.
So I'll just weigh in on that. The one time I'm aware of that a late start was canceled due to budget issues, it was canceled because there was more money, not because there was less money. What had happened was the school committee had approved a late start plan for the high school in a year when they said there's not enough money to transport students to the high school. So much as from the current situation, high school is not a required level of transportation. And this is right before I became superintendent of Northampton. What I believe happened was the late start plan was approved. There was going to be no transportation for the high school. The community was concerned about that, passed a 2.5 override to reinstitute transportation for the high school, among other things. And then because the buses came back, the late start had to be canceled.
Okay, thank you. I also appreciate the conversation around athletics, and we're not the only district concerned about the starting time of our high schools, because the science backs it up. And so I support multi-district conversations about adjusting athletics to provide high schoolers with the opportunity to start a little later. My only other question is that we're talking about communicating with the community and sending out surveys. This is something we've had a lot of experience with, and I think we've gotten some feedback on what works and what doesn't. So I'm just wondering, what is the process for communicating with the community and sort of making sure the survey sort of addresses the needs, or the needs for us to decide which one to vote for.
So I feel we've gotten good with survey methodology in terms of turning out the vote. The last survey we did had over 2,000 responses for 2,700. I mean, I would say for my stats courses, the last 700 don't matter because they're not going to change your result. I think we will do the same thing we did with all the rest of the surveys we've had leading up to this. We'll make sure that they go out not only in all of the district's electronic newsletters, but then are followed up by messages from the principals and from myself about the importance of the survey. My belief is that even though there's nobody here tonight, when the survey says, start time could be, two options, and either option is going to change what your start time is, that will garner a lot of interest and you'll get a lot of feedback on it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, it is interesting how much we're adjusting every family and student's schedule, but there is a way that it'll be nice just to have the kids going to school by then. So seems like a win either way. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Voss.
Thanks. I'm going to echo that as a member of the subcommittee, it's been really great to work on this, but really it's Tammy who did the majority of the deep work. So thank you to Tammy. She presented a lot of options and we certainly brainstormed them, but she did hours and hours of figuring out what made sense. And really, thank goodness you did it before COVID hit, Tammy. It was a lot of work, so thank you. I have a comment and a couple of questions, and I don't actually personally think I have a preference for Plan A or B. I just some observations and comments about things we might think about. First of all, I've heard from a lot of committee members over the years that anyone in the age of 6th to 12th grade probably would benefit from more sleep. So while I know we've heard high schools, I think if we actually look at the age of the kids, this is good for all of that age, all that range. My first question, and I'll just say my 3 comments and Tammy can answer if she has anything to add. But one thing I think we might want to think about is whether or not one of the models is better based on the transition, the smoothness of the bus routes. And what I mean by that is JFK uses the most buses. And so sitting here, I'm trying to draw it out, but putting JFK with the most buses in the middle of everything versus at the end, maybe would have an advantage one way or the other. And I don't know which would be better, but because of how tight the bus schedules are, I think we should think about that a little so that buses run on time as best as possible. And looks like Tammy might come back to that. And my other 2 things were just to observe, I've had people tell me this too, high school students, the way our community is set up tend to have, I think, more, I don't know what I call them, more activity, like sort of planned activities after school in terms of the sports, because our middle school doesn't have sports teams and it doesn't have as many clubs after school, which is too bad. But what people have said is, oh, if the middle school went even later, that could be good to just keep kids busy doing productive things later into the day. So that's just an observation. I know kids grade 6 to 12 all have different things in the afternoon. And the final thing I hope we could maybe think about a little is connecting what will become a new high school schedule to the Smith College schedule. A lot of our juniors and seniors really benefit from taking classes at Smith. And for the record, I looked it up. If we're back to normal, there's a block that starts at 8:25 in the morning and another block that starts at 9:25. And neither of them are obvious to me as an advantage with Plan A or B. but at least talking about it in terms of scheduling the flex block and trying to couple up to some of the Smith College blocks in the day would make a lot of sense. So that's my input.
Thank you. Member Seraphy Cox.
I really appreciated Member Goldman's comment or question about how the survey can best support the decision making of the committee. And so I wonder if maybe the survey can just be run past maybe the chair of the budget subcommittee before it's sent out. I think that would be helpful to have a school committee member's perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Can you include in that running by the school committee member, both the survey and the communication to accompany the survey?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions Member Busansky?
Well, it's interesting. It kind of begs the question, are we just putting plan A and plan B in the survey, or are we also putting an option to keep it the same? Because otherwise, what are elementary school parents really deciding on? Both plans have an 8 o'clock start time. So maybe I've asked and answered my own question.
It'll be a multiple choice test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so no vote this evening. It sounds like there's no vote this evening. And thank you again to our colleagues and obviously to Tammy for her work on this. And we'll wait as the surveys are prepared and go out, and we'll wait to talk about this again, possibly in December. So, okay, so that concludes our new business for this evening. There are no school committee discussion topics listed for this evening. In terms of future business and meeting dates, our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting is Thursday, December 10th at 6:45, and that will be another online Zoom meeting. And now I have a final item on our agenda is an executive session, and I would ask for a motion to move into executive session. Oh, Member Seraphy Cox.
I see Member Levy's hand up. I'm wondering if she has something other than the motion.
I do. And it's a fast, quick question about what you just said, Mayor, about our next meeting being via Zoom. And it's a question about whether we as a school committee think that since we are having our students and teachers return to in-person learning, whether we too might return our meetings to in-person meetings. I see a lot of benefit to doing Zoom meetings because we've had way more participation from the public, and I really appreciate that. And even if we do go back to in-person, I would hope that maybe we could maintain Zoom in some way, shape, or form. But seems like it might go a ways to show our solidarity and support if we also are if we think it's safe enough for our students and teachers to be in person, then likely we should also be in person.
Yeah, I know I've heard that criticism in the public a lot, and I've been tempted to say something about it. But I mean, I don't think there's anything preventing. The main reason why the open meeting law has been suspended this way is not because the 10 of us couldn't meet in a room and socially distance. The problem is the open meeting law requires that open meetings be open and accessible to the public, and that the public has a right under the law to be in the meeting. And we just can't have 300 people in the JFK community room. So if we did it, we would have to create some kind of a hybrid system where the school committee would be in one room, and somehow the public would have to be there on Zoom or something to that effect. I think we would have to come up with some kind of a hybrid method in order to stay in compliance with the law. Because we certainly couldn't say there can only be 25 people from the public. We can't put limits on it. So I think that's the challenge. And then that would be a question from a technology standpoint, because then everyone has to be able to hear each other and everyone has to be able to, the public has to be able to hear everybody that's in the meeting and vice versa. So we would just have to really have a space that would, first of all, allow us all to socially distance, and we'd have to wear masks. And then we would have to have technology that would allow us to let basically an unlimited number of the public who want to attend.
Yeah, I would think yes to all of that. And we're really good at coming up with hybrid models at this point. So
There you go. Well, I'm not so sure. Yeah, we can certainly look into it. And we can ask Mr. Pagan if there's a way. I mean, I suppose we could all be in a meeting and then it could all still be on Zoom. We'd basically be having this meeting with the 10 of us all in the same room, staring at our Zoom computers. So because otherwise I don't know that we have right now a large enough video conferencing screen that we could put the public on a video conferencing screen, or the Zoom meeting itself on a video conferencing screen. So we'd have to figure that piece of it out.
yeah, I guess before I turn it over, the last thing I would say is if we end up deciding the technology doesn't support our being able to do that, I think it might be good for us to say something to the community about why we're continuing to have our meetings on Zoom while our students are in person.
No doubt about it. Because obviously, we're even with our students being in person, we do have limits on how many can be in a room and how many, what the social distancing and what the PPE requirements and unfortunately, those are things that are not compatible with the open meeting law. So we'll have to find some happy medium. So we can do some research on that and come back to you and see what we can come up with. I now have hands that I assume are not related to the executive session motion from Member Voss and Member Gold.
Well, I'm just going to say right now we are offering a hybrid model where people have a choice. And if people want to talk about going in person, I will tell you that's one less person there. I don't see any advantage to meeting in person other than I think the Zoom is working as well as it can. If we were separated wearing masks, I'd have a very hard time understanding what people are saying. And I just don't think it's at all worth the risk. And I'm certainly not going to participate in that right now. I think it's really too risky. And that's why we have choices. People can choose to be remote or not.
Member Gold.
Maybe it's something for Northampton Open Media also to look into. The Springfield Public Schools, they have a hybrid where multiple people of the school committee meet in a room and the public zooms in. Some of the school committee people zoom in, and it's all through Focus Springfield. So maybe I don't know if Northampton Open Media can connect with Focus Springfield to see how they're doing it technologically.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. I chair the Pioneer Valley Transportation Authority Advisory Board, and I know the staff all meet at a conference room on a main screen, and they participate. Well, the board members are all remote, but so certainly that can be done. But obviously, and your point is well taken, Member Voss. You may have all read about a certain city council in the state that never went remote, and have insisted that they go on, that they remain in person the entire time, and actually have been sort of harassing one of their members who does not want to be in person because of health issues. So it's a challenge. So I understand the symbolism of it. I just think we need to also be realistic about it and not put people in a position who don't want to be in person, but we can try to work through those things. Member Seraphy Cox, you have your hand up.
Mine was the executive session motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion about this? Okay, so I'll accept that. I'll entertain that motion if you wish to offer it now.
Motion to enter executive session under Massachusetts General Law Open Meeting Chapter 30A, Section 21A3 to discuss strategy in preparation for collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so there's been a motion made in second to move into executive session. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
and Mayor Narcoitz.
Yes.
The vote is 9 in favor.
Okay, so the vote is adopted. The motion is adopted, and the school committee will now move into an executive session because to hold this discussion in public would be detrimental to our bargaining position. I do need to let the public know that we will not return to open session. We will adjourn directly from the executive session. So any members of the public that are still present will now need to leave the Zoom, and we'll